Captain Ryan Bennett had always been calm in the face of danger. It was part of his training as a pilot. He had flown through asteroid fields, navigated past black holes, and survived dangerous space storms. But nothing could have prepared him for this. His ship, the Ranger, suddenly shook violently. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. Warning. Engine failure. Critical systems offline. The ship's AI, Celine, reported in a calm, robotic voice. It was a strange contrast to the panic that gripped Ryan's chest. Ryan's hands moved quickly over the controls, trying to stabilize the ship. He was deep in uncharted space, far away from any human colonies, a place where no one could help him. His breath came in short bursts as he tried to understand the problem. "Celine, what's going on?" Ryan asked, his voice steady, though he could feel the sweat forming on his brow. "Unidentified malfunction. Engine power loss. Estimated time to impact. 5 minutes," Celine answered, the voice still eerily calm. 5 minutes. Ryan's heart raced. He had no choice but to act. He had trained for this. Emergency landings, crash scenarios. He quickly switched to manual control and steered the Ranger in an attempt to slow its descent. The planet below loomed large, a ball of green and blue, unfamiliar but inviting. He aimed for a dense forest, hoping the trees might break his fall. But as he adjusted the controls, the ship jerked again, this time more violently. The alarms blared louder. Ryan's hands tightened on the controls, but the ship was out of control now, spiraling down with terrifying speed. "Hold on, Celine," Ryan muttered under his breath. The ship slammed into the planet's surface with an earth-shaking crash, sending Ryan's body flying against the seat's harness. Pain shot through his chest, but he barely had time to register it. His mind was still racing, trying to process what had just happened. The ship groaned as if in pain. The hull cracked open, and smoke began to billow out of the cockpit. The AI's voice was distorted now, a sign of the damage. "Warning, systems failing. Immediate evacuation recommended." Ryan didn't need to be told twice. He unbuckled the harness, gritting his teeth as he moved his sore body. The cockpit door was jammed, but with a grunt, he forced it open. His legs felt weak, but he stumbled out onto the metal floor of the ship, now half buried in the thick undergrowth of the planet's forest. Ryan's first priority was to get out of the wreckage. He couldn't risk staying in the ship with the fire growing. He scrambled through the narrow halls of the Ranger, making his way to the exit. Outside, the world was chaotic, a strange mixture of alien plants and trees, none of which looked familiar. The ship was tilted at a weird angle, and Ryan had to climb out through a broken hatch to get to the ground. As he stepped outside, his boots sank into the soft, mossy ground. He coughed, the smoke from the ship's damaged engines thick in the air. He squinted, looking around at the unfamiliar landscape. Towering trees with purple leaves surrounded him, their bark shimmering like glass. The ground was covered in a thick carpet of vibrant green moss that seemed to pulse with energy. Ryan took a deep breath. The air smelled fresh, but there was an odd sweetness to it, as if the planet itself was alive in ways he couldn't understand. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any signs of life or civilization. But there was nothing, just endless forests and strange mountains in the distance. "Celine, status report," Ryan called, hoping for some good news. No response. The AI was offline, possibly damaged beyond repair. It didn't matter now. He needed to survive. He turned and looked back at the wreckage. His ship was a mess, pieces of metal scattered in every direction. The once pristine ship now a twisted heap of scrap. Ryan's heart sank. His only way off this planet was gone. He couldn't afford to panic. He had crash-landed on unknown worlds before, though never this far from any known colony. He was trained for survival, and he'd be damned if he was going to let this world be his grave. Ryan took stock of his situation. The suit he was wearing was still intact, his emergency pack was strapped to his waist, and his survival tools were functional. He had food rations that would last for a few days, a water filtration device, and a small multi-tool for repairs. But none of that would matter if he couldn't find a way to signal for help, or at the very least find shelter. The thought of wandering through this alien forest didn't sit well with him. He needed to know more about this place before he started making decisions. A sense of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. The silence around him was unsettling. No wildlife called out. No winds rustled through the trees. It was as if the planet was holding its breath. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Something didn't feel right. He reached for his multi-tool and adjusted the settings on it, activating a basic scan for life signs. The tool buzzed briefly before displaying a weak signal, a single heat signature, much too small to be a human. He squinted, trying to make sense of it. There, beyond the trees, he could see a small figure moving, almost like it was waiting for him. Was it a survivor, or something else entirely? Ryan's instincts screamed at him to approach cautiously. His pulse quickened. He wasn't alone on this planet. But who, or what, was out there? Without a second thought, he began to move toward the figure, taking slow, deliberate steps through the dense forest. His senses were on high alert as he walked deeper into the unknown. Ryan moved carefully through the dense forest, his eyes scanning every movement, his every sense alert. The figure he had seen was still out there, but it wasn't easy to follow. The alien trees towered over him, their twisting branches blocking out the sun, casting the forest floor in shadow. He had to tread lightly, careful not to make any noise that might startle whatever, or whoever, was ahead. With each step, Ryan's heart beat louder in his chest. He couldn't explain it, but something about this planet felt strange. There was an energy here, something that made him uneasy. It wasn't just the silence or the alien landscape. It was the feeling that someone, or something, was watching him. He pushed the thought away. He had a job to do. He needed to find out who else, if anyone, was on this planet with him. If there was another living being, it might hold the key to his survival, or at least help him figure out what happened here. The last thing he wanted was to be stranded alone on a planet full of unknown dangers. He moved carefully, stepping over tangled vines and under low-hanging branches. The air was thick with the smell of moss and something sweet, like flowers blooming in the heat. Every now and then, he thought he heard a rustling sound from behind him, but when he turned, there was nothing there. He was starting to feel like the forest itself was alive, reacting to his presence. As he continued onward, the figure slowly came into view. It was a woman, tall, graceful, and dressed in clothes that seemed to shimmer as though they were woven from the very light of the planet. Her skin was a pale blue, glowing faintly in the dim light, and her hair shimmered in colors Ryan couldn't quite describe, shifting from silver to green to purple as she moved. She stood still, her gaze fixed on him, as though waiting for him to make the first move. Ryan stopped a few yards away, unsure of what to do next. He had no idea what this woman was or where she had come from. His mind raced, trying to think of a way to communicate with her. Was she from the planet, or something else entirely? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. Ryan was the first to break it, speaking cautiously, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. "Are you human?" he asked. The woman's eyes studied him carefully, as though measuring him, trying to understand what he was saying. Then, with a slight tilt of her head, she answered in a soft voice that carried a strange musical quality. "No, I am not human." Ryan blinked, caught off guard. His heart skipped a beat. Not human. What was she then? She certainly didn't look like anything he had ever seen before. His mind spun with questions. "Then, what are you?" Ryan asked. The woman seemed to consider this for a moment, her eyes flicking to the ground as though lost in thought. "I am Tyra," she said at last, "the last of my people." Ryan frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "The last of your people," he repeated. "What happened to them?" Tara's expression became somber. "It is a long story," she said quietly, almost to herself. But they are gone. All of them. She met his eyes then, and there was a sadness there, a deep ancient sorrow that Ryan couldn't quite understand. Ryan's mind raced. He had a million questions, but he held them back for the moment. This woman, Tyra, was the first sign of life he had encountered on this planet. If she was telling the truth, then the planet was as empty as it seemed. But if she was the last of her kind, then why was she here? What had happened to her people? I am sorry, Ryan said, unsure of what else to say. He didn't know how to respond to the weight of her words, but he could feel the loneliness in them. He understood that. After all, he was stranded here too, alone, with no way off the planet. Tyra seemed to read his thoughts, her eyes softening. You are not the first to come here, she said. Others have come before you, explorers like yourself, but they never stayed. Ryan's brow furrowed. What do you mean, they never stayed? Tyra looked away, her gaze distant. They left. They did not understand this place. They could not see the truth. Ryan didn't know what to say to that. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to live alone on a planet like this. The thought of being the only human here, with no way of getting home, made his stomach turn. He wasn't sure he could last long in this place either. I need to get back to my ship, Ryan said, shaking off the unsettling feeling. Can you help me? I crashed nearby. My ship's been damaged. Tyra turned to him, her expression unreadable. Your ship is not important, she said, her voice low and gentle. The ship will not help you. You need to learn what this place truly is. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? I need to get off this planet. Tyra's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, there was a fire in them, a sense of urgency. There is no leaving, she said, not unless you understand the truth. The planet will not let you go until you do. Ryan's head spun. What was she talking about? He was just trying to survive, to get back to his people. He didn't have time for mysteries or ancient truths. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. I don't understand, he said, his voice tight with frustration. What truth? Tyra stepped closer to him, her presence oddly calming despite the intensity in her words. You will. But first, you must stay. Ryan stared at her, his heart pounding. There was no turning back now. He had no choice but to trust her. Whatever this place was, whatever it had done to her people, he was now a part of it. And if he wanted to survive, he would have to learn its secrets. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something far deeper than a simple crash landing. Tyra, the mysterious alien girl who claimed to be the last of her people, had warned him that leaving the planet wasn't an option unless he understood its truth. But what truth? And why had she said that his ship was not important? They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of her words hanging between them like an invisible force. Ryan's eyes scanned the alien forest around them, the odd glowing trees casting long shadows as the sun began to dip behind the distant mountains. The planet was beautiful in its own strange way, but it was also alien in a way he couldn't yet comprehend. So, what exactly are you saying? Ryan asked, trying to keep his voice calm. I can't leave. Is there some sort of force keeping me here? Tyra's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. Yes, something is keeping you here. This place, it is not just a planet. It has a mind of its own. It watches, it waits, and it does not let go of those it chooses to bind. Ryan frowned, confused and more than a little unsettled. Bind? What does that even mean? I'm just trying to get out of here. I don't have time for whatever this is. Tyra's gaze never wavered, and her voice was gentle but firm. You may not have time, but the planet does. It will not let you leave until it has its answers. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. He had been trained to be calm in all situations, but now, standing on this strange planet with this even stranger alien girl, his training was starting to break down. There was too much he didn't know. And more importantly, There was too much he had to learn. He tried to focus on the immediate problem. His ship. It was wrecked, and without it, there was no way he could get back to space or contact his crew. He had to fix it, no matter what. "I'm sorry, Tara, but I have to get back to my ship," Ryan said, his voice steady, though his mind raced with worry. "You say the planet is keeping me here, but I have to try. I can't just stay here forever." Tara seemed to understand his frustration, but she shook her head slowly. "The ship will not help you. The planet does not want you to leave. But if you stay, if you learn what it wants you to learn, you may find a way to survive. The planet has its ways." Ryan stared at her, unsure of what to make of her words. The planet had ways. What did that mean? He could feel his patience beginning to wear thin, but something in Tara's tone stopped him. There was a quiet sadness in her eyes that made him hesitate. "Okay," Ryan said finally, "but I still need to understand. You say the planet has its ways. What does that mean for me? How can I survive here if I don't understand?" Tara's expression softened, and she motioned for him to follow her. Without another word, she began to walk deeper into the forest, her long, glowing hair swaying behind her as she moved. Ryan didn't hesitate. He followed her closely, trying to keep up with her easy, graceful steps. She moved through the alien trees as if she knew them all intimately, as if the planet itself was her home, guiding her every step. As they walked, Ryan couldn't help but notice how different everything seemed on this planet. The air was thick with a strange, sweet smell, like flowers that had never bloomed before. The trees seemed to hum, their branches vibrating ever so slightly, as though the entire forest was alive with energy. And though he couldn't see it, Ryan could sense that there was something just beyond the trees, something that watched them. The further they went, the more Ryan felt a sense of unease creeping into his thoughts. It was like the planet itself was reacting to his presence, testing him in ways he couldn't understand. Finally, after a long walk, they came to a small clearing. The trees here were different, larger with silver bark that shimmered in the dimming light. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone structure, covered in strange symbols and carvings that Ryan couldn't recognize. It looked old, thousands of years old, perhaps. "This is where it all began," Tara said quietly, her eyes locked on the structure. "My people built this place, long before I was born. It holds the knowledge of everything that happened here, the rise and fall of my civilization. And now, it is waiting for you." Ryan took a step forward, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What is it waiting for? And what happened to your people?" Tara turned to face him, her eyes filled with a deep, painful sorrow. "My people were once united with the planet. We understood it, and it understood us. But something changed. The pulse, the force that powers this world, became unstable. It destroyed everything we had built. And now, it is up to me to keep the planet alive." Ryan's brow furrowed. "The pulse. What is that?" Tyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in her gaze. "The pulse is what connects the planet to the stars. It is the lifeblood of this world. Without it, this place would die. But it is also what keeps us here, what keeps me here. I am bound to the pulse, and so are you." Ryan's mind raced. The pulse. He didn't fully understand what Tara meant, but he could tell it was something powerful. And it seemed to be at the heart of everything that had gone wrong on this planet. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the growing tension in his chest. Tara turned toward the stone structure, her expression serious. "Now we begin to learn. You must understand the pulse. And you must understand the truth about this planet. Only then will you be able to decide if you are truly bound to it." Ryan swallowed hard. He had no idea what he had just walked into, but there was no turning back now. He had to follow Tara. He had to understand what this planet wanted from him. And more importantly, he had to survive. The clearing was silent now, except for the faint hum of the alien trees around them. Ryan stood beside Tara, staring at the ancient stone structure in front of them. It was covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly as if the very walls of the building were alive. His mind raced with questions. What was this pulse? And why did Tyra say he was bound to it? Tyra turned to face him, her glowing eyes steady. She didn't seem nervous at all, but Ryan could feel the weight of her words pressing on him. The pulse, she began, her voice quiet, is the heartbeat of this world. It connects everything. The trees, the animals, the very soil. It is what makes this planet alive, and it is what gave life to my people. Without it, we would not have existed. Ryan frowned, trying to understand. But you said it became unstable. How does that happen? Tara's expression darkened, her gaze drifting toward the stone structure again. We didn't understand the pulse fully. My people believed we could control it, that we could use it to power our cities, our ships, everything. But we didn't know its true nature. The pulse is not something that can be controlled. It is a force of nature, and when we tried to control it, we broke it. Ryan looked at her, his mind trying to piece together her story. So your people, they caused the destruction. Tara nodded slowly. Yes, the pulse reacted violently. It destroyed everything we had built. It wiped out most of my people. I was the only one left, the only one who could understand the pulse enough to keep the planet from dying. But even now, the pulse is unstable. It is dying, slowly. Ryan was silent for a moment, absorbing what she had said. The pulse, this mysterious force, was the reason why the planet was so strange, and why Tara was the last of her people. But what did that have to do with him? Why was he being brought into this? He looked at her, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. And you say I'm bound to the pulse. What does that mean? Tara met his gaze, her voice serious. You and your ship, you are connected to the pulse. The moment you crash-landed here, the pulse reacted to your presence. It drew you in. You are now a part of it, just like I am. The planet will not let you leave until you understand the truth of its existence. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He was bound to this place. How could that be? He had no memory of anything that could connect him to this planet. He was just a pilot, a human who had crashed on an unknown world. He didn't have any special connection to the pulse, or so he thought. Tara continued, sensing his confusion. You are not the first to be drawn here. Many before you have come, explorers, travelers, even settlers. But they all left when they could not understand the pulse. Only those who can see the truth of the planet's heartbeat can survive. The rest, her voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. The rest never made it. Ryan's mind raced. He had to survive. He had to get back to his people. But the more he listened to Tara, the more he realized that escaping wasn't going to be as simple as fixing his ship. He was tangled in something far bigger than a crash. What is the truth then? Ryan asked, his voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at him. What do I need to understand about this planet? Tyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, she stepped closer to him. The truth is that the pulse is not just a force. It is a living thing. It grows. It shifts. It has a mind of its own. It is not a tool to be used. It is part of the planet, part of its soul. And it has chosen you. Ryan took a step back, feeling the weight of her words. Chosen me. But I don't understand. I'm not special. I'm just a pilot. I don't know anything about the pulse or this planet. Tara's face was calm, but her eyes held an intensity that made Ryan uneasy. The pulse chose you because you are open to it. You are not like the others. The others came here with their minds closed, thinking they could control it. But you came here, and you listened. You felt the planet's heart. Ryan shook his head. He didn't feel anything. All he felt was fear. Fear of being trapped here. Fear of not being able to leave. But maybe Tara was right. Something had drawn him to this place. He didn't know what it was, but he could feel a strange connection to the world around him. The trees seemed to sway in response to his movements. The ground beneath his feet felt alive. Why me? he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why did the pulse choose me? Tara's gaze softened, and for a moment, she seemed almost sad. I don't know, but the pulse doesn't make mistakes. It chose you because you have the potential to save this world, or destroy it. Ryan swallowed hard. Save it? How could I possibly save it? Tara stepped toward the stone structure, her hand resting on the smooth surface of one of the carvings. The symbols began to glow brighter, and Ryan felt a strange pull toward them. You must learn to connect with the pulse, she said. It will guide you, but you must listen carefully. If you try to control it, it will destroy you. If you understand it, you will find a way to heal this planet. Ryan hesitated. He had no idea how to connect with something like the pulse. It sounded impossible. But then again, everything about this planet was impossible. He had crashed here, and now he was being asked to understand something beyond his comprehension. But if there was even a chance he could help this planet, and himself, he had to try. I'll do it, Ryan said, his voice firm. I'll try to understand. But I need to know more. I can't do this without understanding how the pulse works. Tara nodded. I will show you. But you must trust the planet, and you must trust me. If you do, the pulse will reveal itself to you. But if you fail, she didn't finish the sentence, but Ryan didn't need her to. The warning was clear. Ryan took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to learn what he needed to know. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for sure. His survival depended on understanding the pulse. The sun had almost disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the sky streaked with orange and purple hues. The air felt different now, as if the planet itself was breathing, alive in a way Ryan couldn't fully understand. He stood beside Tara, his heart racing with uncertainty. The stone structure before them seemed to pulse in time with his own heartbeat, its ancient carvings glowing more brightly as they stood near. You must touch it, Tara said softly, her voice calm and patient. The pulse is inside. It's the heart of this planet. Ryan hesitated, his fingers trembling as he reached toward the stone. It was warm to the touch, the surface alive with a strange energy. As his hand made contact, the world around him seemed to shift. The trees, the ground, even the sky, they all blurred together, as though he had stepped into another world. Suddenly, he was no longer standing in the clearing. He found himself standing in a vast, empty space. The ground was smooth and black, stretching out in all directions. Above him, a brilliant light pulsed, its rhythm steady and calming. It felt like the heart of the planet, the source of everything. A voice echoed in his mind, soft yet powerful. You are here, it said. You are one with the pulse. Ryan froze. The voice was not like anything he had heard before. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it was as clear as if someone were standing right next to him. He looked around, but there was no one there. Who are you? He asked, his voice trembling. What is this place? The voice did not answer immediately, but the light above him grew brighter. The pulse grew louder, and Ryan realized it was not just in his ears. It was in his chest, in his blood. He could feel the rhythm of the planet's heartbeat deep inside him. I am the pulse, the voice said finally. I am the life force of this world. I give and take, I heal and destroy. I am the planet's heart, and I am yours to command, if you understand. Ryan's mind spun. The pulse was speaking to him. It was alive, conscious, and it had somehow connected to him. He was no longer just an outsider, a crash survivor. He was part of this planet, part of its very essence, and yet he had no idea what that meant or how he could use this power. He wasn't even sure he wanted it. Command? Ryan asked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't understand. I don't want to control you. I just want to get home. The voice seemed to consider this, and the light above him flickered for a moment. You cannot leave until you understand. The pulse is not a thing to be controlled. It is a force of nature, a force that must be respected. But you have a choice. You can learn from me, or you can resist. But if you resist, the pulse will reject you. Ryan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He didn't want to resist, but he didn't know how to accept what was happening. His mind raced with thoughts of his crew, of the people waiting for him back on Earth. He couldn't stay here forever. He couldn't live in this strange world, bound to something he didn't understand. What happens if I resist? Ryan asked, his voice shaking now. What will you do? The voice was calm, almost gentle. If you resist, you will die. The pulse will not let those who do not understand live here. It will drain your life force, slowly. But if you learn, if you listen, you will grow strong. You will become part of the planet. You will be free. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He had never felt so small, so helpless. He wanted to scream, to fight back against this strange force. But something inside him told him that fighting it was not the answer. He had no choice but to learn, to accept the truth of this place, and hope that somehow it would lead him back home. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. I'll learn, he said, his voice steady now. I'll understand. But I need your help. Please, tell me what I need to do. The light above him brightened again, and the voice filled his mind. First, you must listen. The pulse will show you what has been lost, what has been broken. You must see the past, understand the mistakes of your people and mine. Only then will you know how to heal the planet. Ryan nodded, though he wasn't sure what he was agreeing to. His mind was still reeling, trying to understand what was happening. He wasn't a scholar or a philosopher. He was a pilot, a man trained to navigate through space, not to commune with a living planet. But somehow, this was happening, and he had no choice but to follow. The light around him began to swirl, and Ryan felt himself being pulled toward it. He tried to resist, but the force was too strong. He was being shown something he had to see. Suddenly, images began to flash before his eyes. He saw the planet as it had been centuries ago, a thriving world, full of life. Its forests rich with vibrant colors, its skies clear and filled with strange creatures. The people of this world, Terra's people, walked freely through the lush landscapes. They were united with the planet, their lives in harmony with the pulse. But then, the images shifted. He saw the people beginning to change, growing obsessed with harnessing the power of the pulse. Cities were built, machines were created, and the once peaceful planet was altered. The pulse began to weaken, its once steady rhythm growing erratic, until it collapsed in a violent surge that destroyed everything. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as he watched the destruction unfold. He could feel the pain of the planet, the anguish of its people as they tried and failed to control the pulse. It was a terrible, unstoppable force. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the vision ended. Ryan found himself back in the clearing, standing beside Terra. The stone structure was still in front of him, but now it felt different. He understood something now, something deep inside. He had seen the past, the truth of what had happened here, and he realized that the key to surviving was not controlling the pulse, but respecting it. He had to find a way to heal what had been broken. Terra was watching him closely, her expression unreadable. "What did you see?" she asked softly. Ryan took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. "I saw the past. I saw what your people did. They tried to control the pulse, and it destroyed them." Terra nodded. "Yes, but now you understand." Ryan swallowed hard. "Now I understand, and I know what I have to do." Ryan stood silently, the weight of the vision heavy on his mind. The past he had seen, the destruction caused by the pulse, replayed in his thoughts over and over again. He had learned that the pulse was not just a force, it was the very lifeblood of the planet, and his connection to it was undeniable. But what could he do now? How could he fix something so deeply broken? Terra watched him closely, her eyes soft but intense. It was clear she was waiting for him to make a decision. He could feel her presence beside him, like a silent support, yet the pressure of his next steps was all his. You've seen it now, Tara said gently. You know what happened to my people. You know what happened to this planet. Ryan nodded slowly, his mind still racing. I saw what they did. They tried to control the pulse, to bend it to their will, and it destroyed them. I saw the cities, the machines, the chaos. Tara's face tightened at the memory, but she didn't interrupt. Yes, my people thought they could use the pulse. They were wrong. The pulse is not something to control. It is something to understand, to live with. Only those who understand it can survive. Ryan looked at the stone structure, its ancient carvings glowing softly in the dim light. The same stone he had touched earlier. The same stone that had connected him to the pulse. He could still feel it pulsing inside him, like a second heartbeat. So, if I'm going to help this planet, I have to understand the pulse, right? He asked, his voice heavy with uncertainty. But what does that even mean? How do I understand something like this? Tara stepped closer, her voice steady. You've already started. The pulse is not just a thing. It is a presence. It is alive. It has a rhythm, a pattern. It speaks, if you know how to listen. You must learn its language. Ryan frowned. He didn't understand. The pulse was alive. It spoke. It didn't make any sense to him. But he knew that he couldn't leave this place without finding out more. There was no way back to Earth without understanding what had gone wrong here, and how to fix it. I'm not sure I can do this, Ryan said, his voice low. I'm not like you. I'm just a pilot. How can I possibly learn the language of the pulse? Tyra's eyes softened, and for a moment, Ryan saw a glimpse of the pain she carried. You are not alone. You never were. The pulse chose you for a reason, just like it chose me. You are part of this planet now. Your heart beats in time with the pulse. You just need to listen. Ryan closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. His mind was still filled with questions, but he knew Tara was right. He couldn't keep running from this. He had to face whatever was coming. The pulse was alive inside him. He could feel it. He had to learn to understand it. What do I do now? He asked, his voice more determined. Tara nodded toward the stone structure. You must go inside. The answers are there. The pulse will guide you. Ryan stared at the structure, his heart pounding. He felt a pull toward it, a strange sense of destiny that he couldn't explain. He had no choice but to trust Tara and step forward. He had come this far, and there was no turning back. With a deep breath, he walked toward the structure. As his hand touched the cool stone, the carvings began to glow brighter, the pulse growing stronger, almost as if it was responding to his presence. The air around him seemed to shimmer, and Ryan felt his surroundings shift once again. This time, he wasn't pulled into the vision he had seen earlier. Instead, the world around him began to dissolve, and he found himself standing in a vast, dark space. The sound of a heartbeat echoed around him, slow and steady, like the pulse of the planet itself. He could feel the rhythm in his chest, matching the beat of the pulse. In front of him, a figure began to materialize. It was a woman, tall and graceful, with glowing skin and eyes that shone like stars. She was dressed in flowing robes, and her presence radiated power and peace. She was familiar to him, though he didn't know how. She looked like Tara, but she was different, older, wiser. You have come, the woman said, her voice calm and soothing. You have listened to the pulse. You have accepted your fate. Ryan stepped forward, his heart racing. Who are you? He asked. What is this place? I am the voice of the pulse, she replied. I am the keeper of its rhythm, the guardian of its truth. I am what remains of my people, what is left of the knowledge they once held. I am here to guide you. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. The woman's presence was overwhelming, but there was something comforting about it as well. He could feel her connection to the pulse, to the planet. She was part of it, just as he was now. What do you want from me? Ryan asked, his voice shaking. The pulse has chosen you, the woman said, her gaze steady. You must choose now. Will you accept your place as the next guardian, the next keeper of the pulse? Will you help this planet heal, or will you resist, like those before you, and destroy everything? Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. The choice was clear, yet it was the hardest decision he had ever faced. He had seen the destruction caused by the pulse, the devastation that came from trying to control it. But he also saw the peace, the harmony that had once existed. The pulse wasn't something to be controlled. It was something to be understood, to be respected. I want to help, Ryan said, his voice steady. I want to heal this planet, but I don't know how. The woman smiled, and her form began to glow brighter, as if the pulse itself was surrounding her. You already know, she said. The pulse is in you, and you are in the pulse. You must learn to listen, to guide the rhythm. You are the key to restoring balance. Ryan nodded, his mind racing. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. He had to do this, for the planet, for Terra, and for himself. Ryan stood before the glowing figure, the woman who had appeared from the depths of the pulse. Her presence was like a calm storm, powerful yet peaceful. The heartbeat of the planet echoed in his chest, matching the rhythm of his own heart. He felt connected to everything. The earth beneath his feet, the air around him, the stars above him. He was no longer just a man lost on an alien world. He was a part of it, and the planet had become a part of him. You must make your choice, the woman said again, her voice like a gentle breeze. Will you accept your place as the keeper of the pulse, or will you resist and bring this world to its end? Ryan closed his eyes, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. He had already seen the past. He had seen the destruction caused by the people who had tried to control the pulse. But he had also seen the peace, the harmony, the way the pulse had once connected everything. The choice wasn't just about power. It wasn't about domination. It was about respect, about balance. He opened his eyes and looked at the woman, the keeper of the pulse. I want to help. I want to heal this planet. But I can't do it alone. I need to understand. The woman smiled, a soft, knowing smile. You already understand more than you think. The pulse is not a thing to control. It is a living force, and like all living things, it must be respected. It must be allowed to flow naturally. You will guide it, but not with force, only with understanding. Ryan nodded, feeling the surge of determination inside him. He had already come so far. He had seen the truth of the pulse. He had connected with it. But now he needed to act. He needed to find a way to bring harmony back to the world. The pulse is unstable, he said, his voice steady. I've seen it. It's broken. How can I fix it? The pulse is not broken, the woman replied softly. It is wounded, yes. It has been hurt by those who try to control it. But it is not beyond repair. You will be the one to restore the balance, to guide the pulse back to its natural rhythm. Ryan took a deep breath. He could feel the pulse within him, the steady beat, the life force of the planet. It wasn't just something to be studied. It was something to be lived with, something to be nurtured. He had to learn to listen, to feel the natural flow of the pulse, and guide it back to where it should be. How? He asked. How do I heal it? The woman's eyes glowed with a soft light. You will need to connect to the source. The pulse is strongest at the heart of this world. You must go there, to the center of the planet, and listen. The pulse will guide you. Ryan looked around, trying to comprehend what she was saying. The heart of the planet. How could he reach such a place? The woman seemed to sense his confusion. You have already made the connection, she said. The pulse has already chosen you. All you need to do is trust in it, trust in yourself. With that, she began to fade, her form dissolving into the shimmering light. As she vanished, Ryan felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. He wasn't alone. The pulse was with him. And now, it was time to do what he had come here to do. He turned toward Terra, who had been standing silently behind him, watching him with wide eyes. She seemed to sense the change in him. "You are ready," she said softly. "I can feel it. The pulse, it is calm now. It is waiting for you." Ryan nodded, a sense of clarity filling his mind. He wasn't sure what lay ahead, but he knew he had to go to the center of the planet, the heart of the pulse. He had to listen, understand, and heal. That was his mission now. "I'm going," he said, his voice firm. "I'll go to the heart of the planet. It's the only way to fix this." Tyra didn't hesitate. "I will guide you. I know the way." Together, they began their journey. They walked through the dense forest, the trees parting before them as if they were guiding them themselves. The path was not easy. It was long and filled with challenges, but Ryan felt something inside him growing stronger with each step. The pulse was there, in the air, in the ground, in the very heartbeat of the world. It was all around him, guiding him, speaking to him in ways he couldn't fully understand. But he trusted it, and that was enough. After days of travel, they reached the center of the planet. It was a vast underground cavern, the walls covered in glowing crystals that pulsed with the rhythm of the pulse. In the center of the cavern stood a massive glowing core, an orb of energy that radiated warmth and power. Ryan stepped forward, his heart beating in time with the core. He could feel it. The pulse. It was not a force to be controlled. It was a part of everything. It was the lifeblood of the planet, and it was waiting for him. He raised his hands toward the core, closing his eyes. "I understand," he whispered. "I'm here to help. I'm here to heal." As his hands touched the core, the pulse surged through him, filling him with light, with understanding. He could feel the balance shifting, the world beginning to heal. The pulse was no longer unstable. It was no longer broken. It was alive, flowing naturally, just as it should. Ryan felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The world was healing, and so was he. He had found his place, his purpose. He was no longer just a pilot lost in space. He was a part of this planet, a part of the pulse, and together, they would restore the balance to the world.